My guest today is Sigmund Bloom, the co-founder of footballguys.com, a fantasy football website. Go there to check out all the stuff they've got. They've got all kind of great content to help you win your fantasy football leagues. As always, if you enjoyed the conversation today, make sure you like and subscribe to the Big Douglas Show. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Sigmund Bloom. Sigmund, when did you first fall in love with football?
It's funny. When I was a kid and they said, you can be whatever you want to be, I said, I want to be the play-by-play announcer for the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Steelers, I was born in 75, so the Steelers in the mid-'80s, the Mark Malone years, weren't exactly a team that really grabbed you and pulled you in. I think, though, that still, I can remember Kellen Winslow. I must have been 5 or 6 years old after that epic San Diego Miami double overtime game, the classic picture. I can remember John Riggins busting through the line in the Super Bowl to clinch that game against Dan Marino. And I remembered feeling like this game and the old NFL films, John Facenda, the old NFL films, it was just epic. It was like, as a kid reading, say, about Greek mythology and then watching the NFL, it felt like it was the same scale. And when it came time for me to devote myself professionally to a sport, football was really easy because it energizes you in that way, because of the immense amount of energy that the people involved are using, that are summoning up to keep it so compelling.
In New Orleans now, I was originally going to ask you if you are a Saints guy. Before we got on, we did a little
Yeah.
chatting. I know you're from the Pittsburgh area originally. It's a two-part question. Do you have a favorite football team? And does like being in the fantasy football space, has it like taken away from your main fandom of whatever your favorite team used
Right,
to be?
right. I mean, if you're a Steelers fan. I mean, you're a Steelers fan if you grew up in Pittsburgh. My sister wanted to show everybody she was a rebel by being a Cowboys fan. So I mean, it's just that simple. You're grow up in West Pennsylvania, you're a Steelers fan, and Eastern Ohio and Northern West Virginia and so on. Uh, and it has taken away because I can't obsess about the Steelers anymore, right? I can't know everything about the third guard battling the backup center for the eighth roster spot at offensive line or something like that. These are, I guess, I don't want to say sacrifices because that'll make it sound noble, but I think that as Western Pennsylvania Steelers fan, you have a river of football running through your head at all times anyway. So it was a natural transition. I do love the Saints. I have a place in my heart for the Saints. And I'll tell you this, Doug, when the Steelers win, everyone's happy. When the Steelers lose, it's so-and-so this and that, and they're not happy. But the Saints fans love their team like it's their kids' team, right? No matter what, at the end of the day, they love their team and they love their players and they love being a Saints fan. There has to be 20 songs about the Saints and being a Saints fan for every one song about other teams. And the other thing is, as Saints fans, one of the things that tickles me is the Saints, even when they're down, all they need to say is 28-3. So, okay, maybe the Saints are down, but hey, remember that time the Falcons blew a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl? And everybody's happy again. And so no matter what, in New Orleans, all roads lead back to a smile.
Maybe the song, you're in a musical town, so maybe that's why there's a song disparity between the two fan bases. So you are the co-owner of footballguys.com. It's a wildly successful adventure. Tell me how you got started in it and what was the genesis of the whole concept?
Yeah, and I came in a few years after that Joe Bryant and David Dodd started it. And David has since retired. David's awesome. One of the true geniuses. We throw the word genius around a lot. He needed graphite. He needed to grease a Rubik's Cube with graphite because it wouldn't move as fast as his brain. He could solve a Rubik's Cube in like 22 seconds or something like that. Anyway, I remember my first real job at the University of Texas. We had our office league, and my friend Rob Harling, love you, Rob, showed us this site, Football Guys. This would be in 2000, I think. And there was a message board where the people talked about football the way we talked about football, right? I mean, this is long enough ago that you were still relying mostly on print media. you were parsing every word any coach or anybody said. On the message board at Football Guys, there'd be somebody who said, I went to a training camp practice, here's everything, like a 6-page comprehensive report of every single thing I saw. They're running more sets. People know these things, they're conversant in things like 12 personnel. But back then, if somebody was talking about the number of 2 tight end sets, looks like it's going to go up this year. Wow, this is valuable information. These are people that are thinking about football and talking about it the way I do. And then there would be the staff accounts. And a lot of these people are still around: Bob Henry, John Norton, Jason Wood. And in a thread at the message board, every now and then a staff member with the special avatar and the special account would jump in, and they would comment maybe, and you would just wait for the day that they might say, like, that's a really good piece of information you got, or I hadn't looked at it that way. Wow, Jason Wood or Bob Henry actually read what I wrote. And I started writing articles just to measure up to what I saw as the level of discourse in the message board. And it all really came from that. And Football Guys has always been a place where we cultivate our staffers from our community. We're just an extension of the fantasy football community. We're not trying to capitalize on it. We're not trying to make our name as the most clever, exciting, innovative people in the space. We're just one of you, a lot of you, 70 of you, I don't know exactly how many, that love fantasy football and love football. And it's a privilege to get to make content and get to do this as a profession.
So when you were talking about, kind of when fantasy first started, we're doing this on paper. Everybody was in the same room. And when you think that where we're at now is like just incredible, what is the next step?
Yeah.
We've got AI on the forefront of everything. I mean, technologically, everything is moving at the speed of light. What is the next step? What is the next evolution in fantasy football, do you think?
Doug, I think we go back to where we started. Really, I think where else is there to go, right? I think fantasy football started and persists because it keeps people connected, and it keeps people in each other's lives. I think us men in particular, we're not the most touchy-feely. We haven't been brought up. Maybe it's changing now. We weren't brought up to be emotionally vulnerable or express ourselves, but through our fantasy football leagues, we keep that kinship through those shared experiences. The people that go to a cabin every year for their draft. This is how people are staying in touch with people they went to high school with, or grew up with, or went to college with, or worked with, or people from their fraternity. And I think that that's still the glue of fantasy football in the community, not how much you win, not how much better you are, not how much money you made, not if you were the first one to see that Justin Jefferson was going to be the greatest wide receiver ever or something like that. And the other thing I'll say is, I think it's therapy. I think it's, especially in this world, I'll say this, over the last 3 years, we're all traumatized. But we don't have time. The pace of life in the United States does not give us time to practice self-care. So we just keep going. But when you're managing your fantasy team, when you're preparing for your draft, when you're making your waiver claims, when you're setting your lineup, everything else just fades in the background. When you're watching the game, everything else just fades in the background. So I think that those elements, the community and the therapeutic, the peace that comes with fantasy football, I think those elements, the personality, you mentioned AI, there's going to still be, it's still going to be about personality. It's still going to be about a human connection, right? Football Guys, I feel like, bring on AI, because our quote unquote brand was always that we're just regular people with regular people voices talking to you the way regular people talk. And if that makes us stand out more because everything else is going to start to feel and look the same because it's so fast and cheap to have AI make your content, then bring it on, because we just like hanging out with the people that like hanging out with us.
Sigmund, what is your favorite way to play the game?
Ooh,
there are a million ways to play.
Yeah, there are. Well, this takes me back to one of the things that first really hooked me on fantasy football. We had a league. It was run on Yahoo groups on plain text documents, and every franchise, there were 20 franchises, and we all had a team in each sport: hockey, football, basketball, and baseball. And we would compete against each other year round. And it was a salary cap contract league, which I like that, although that's too time intensive now with my spending so much time creating content. But I loved, it was my first IDP league. It was my first league with 11 starting players on defense. And I love the idea of investing yourself in understanding the defensive side of the ball, understanding the individual players and all the plot lines there, because then everything takes on this richness. Because one of the things I think that's underrated about fantasy football is it just makes everything you watch more meaningful. The more you know about the players, the more you know about the teams, the coaches, it's more interesting. And when you add defense to that, that takes it to the next level. So yeah, IDP leagues, that's my jam.
And do you think that you're closer than most? Do you think it is making headway
Yeah.
into being more popular? I speak to a lot of people who are like, IDP, man, it's more I've got to learn. It's more,
Right,
more
right,
and more and
right.
more. But I'm with you. I enjoy the IDP leagues, and I think it adds a little something. Do you think it's gaining traction?
Incrementally. I think that Dynasty might be growing a little bit faster, where the next step is I want to play the same kind of fantasy football, but I want to have players on my team year over year or get rewarded for, continuing years. If I was right about somebody, rookie drafts and that kind of ritual added to your typical league that you play out. But I see incrementally the people that love IDP really love it. And then when somebody's converted, then it's the same thing. Like they only want to play in IDP leagues. So I think you're going to see a slower growth, but the people who do play IDP are going to stay with IDP.
If you could get rid of one rule,
yeah,
for fantasy football,
that's
what
easy.
is it right now?
That's so easy. Vetoing trades. That's just, this is one of those things I think, my, oh my, what is this? This is up there with talking about politics and religion at Thanksgiving dinner. Like, do you want problems? Are you just trying to create problems? Because vetoing trades, and I would tell everybody unequivocally, if you're joining a fantasy football league and they have trades that can be vetoed via a vote of the members of the league, get out.
Get out.
Go. It's terrible.
Yeah.
First of all, it causes problems because we're all human beings and people will not vote strictly based on some integrity or standard of fairness. They'll just vote because the team that is out of it traded one of their best players to the team that was already the first seed in the playoffs, and they'll say, I don't want them to win. And the funny thing is that player often doesn't even help them win anyway. And then it just creates division. And I'll just put it this way. If there is collusion, right? Because then the question, well, what if there's collusion? If there is collusion in your league, then you just need to remove those people from your league. You play out the year, okay? You say, okay, we can't prove collusion, right? We can't prove it. But you should only allow people into your league in the first place that you trust to be honorable. And then if it becomes clear that they're not going to be honorable, then you have to kick them out of the league. Trade vetoes create... I'll put it this way to you also, Doug. I've yet to hear the story, and I'm inviting people to, and maybe I'll hear some stories where trade vetoes actually improve their league. That they say,
Right.
if we didn't have that rule about vetoing trades, everything just would have fallen apart.
I always find this interesting. How many leagues are you in this year?
The number's going down. The number of leagues that I actually have to play out and monitor weekly is down to about 10 or 12. At a peak, it was in the 20s, and it was just too much. It was one of those things where with my schedule, if I had time to prepare my waiver claims, then that would be the last thing I would do. If I had time to set my lineups on a Sunday morning, that would be the last thing that I would do. And I just thought it wasn't fair to the other people in the leagues with me too, because I just wasn't able to put my best face forward in these leagues. But 10 or 12 is about the number I think I can manage. And you always have to be, I would be very wary of any fantasy football analyst who isn't still playing and doesn't still get involved in having your juices flowing every week, because that is how you're going to really have something to say, not just by data analysis and things like that. So 10 or 12 is good. And I think it's fun everywhere from, our longtime staff leagues at Football Guys to some leagues that I'm in because of the wonderful IDP formats and the complexity and the challenge. And then every now and then I'll pick up a new one to get to play with some people I haven't played with before.
Sigmund, how has best ball and daily fantasy kind of changed the landscape of fantasy in your mind?
I think that it has correctly, on the daily fantasy front, it has gotten people smarter about projecting a week and thinking about the season in week to week increments and really focusing on matchups, focusing on how this team's scheme and defense matches up against this team's scheme and offense, these personnel, and really drilling down to that week, which is a little more difficult to predict than over the course of a season. How is a team going to perform? How is a player going to perform? But I do think that for the most part, DFS and fantasy football have remained somewhat separate as communities. There's some overlap. I'm not going to say there's no overlap. Now, best ball is really a subset of fantasy football because, well, it's all of our favorite thing to do, drafting. We all love to draft. I mean, isn't that what it's about, right? I mean, at Football Guys, some of the drafts, the old free-for-all on the message board, some of the things that people would draft. I was one time in a rock and roll band draft where you draft like members of your rock and roll band and you see who could put together the best band and things like that. And there were other ones, maybe some that I might not mention on the air. But we love drafting. We love this idea of we're going to rank and we're going to compare each other's rankings and see, who's smarter or who has the better takes. And best ball gives you a chance to do that. But then also best ball gives you a chance to research for the drafts you care about, right? Your home league or your big money league. So you do those reps in those best ball leagues through the spring and the early summer, and then you're ready. You're not, when your draft comes, like you're almost like, that's it, it's over. Like, can we do another one? Because your brain is well oiled. So I think that best ball has made everybody become better drafters. It's given us better data about what the community thinks, because I think that a lot of our ADP data was coming from public platforms like ESPN, Yahoo, and so on. And that's just going to have a lot of noise in the data. People who signed up for leagues and didn't show up for the draft, people who are just relying on auto pick, people who are just going on the default rankings. But when you get to these best ball leagues where people have whatever skin in the game, $10, whatever it is for the entry, or trying to win some big jackpot, then those are valid ADPs that you can use to have a much more predictable way to get the drop on your league instead of being surprised.
I've noticed it feels like there are more former players, current players getting involved, starting different things. Better for the community when the players also enjoy the format.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is great. It's well, because they're going to make us smarter about football. And look, I like to say, Doug, I like to say we're peeking through keyholes. Really, we know so little. We think we know so much, but we know so little. And I think players and giving the players perspective on the game helps us, and it will make you a better fantasy player, and it will acquaint you with things that can't be captured on a spreadsheet, that can't be captured by an algorithm, that matter in fantasy football. So I think that that's great. I think players doing more podcasts, great. I love hearing stories, the human side of the game, anything that breaks down those barriers between the fans of the game and those who play it, coach it, and are part of it is a good thing.
Where are you at with the super flex? How many quarterbacks do we need to start on it? Because you can only have your league so big, right? You run out of quarterbacks worth rostering.
Yeah, I recommend people go to Superflex. I mean, if you want a challenging, if it's a casual league, one quarterback's fine. You may still do something like 5 or 6 point pass touchdowns, or bonuses for 300-point games, or bonuses for long touchdowns, something to create more of a spread at the position. Or otherwise, the strategy in the draft becomes a lot less interesting. But when you have a super flex, now you have to make much more difficult decisions. When are you going to take your first quarterback, maybe in the first round? Or are you going to wait? You're going to wait on your second quarterback, and it rewards you more for hitting on the right quarterback. So I think that super flex is definitely where it's at. And in our Football Guys championship, we did do 6 point pass touchdowns, only one quarterback, but we also did two flexes with 3 wide receivers, not just one flex. Anything that makes it deeper makes it more interesting, more strategy, and I think it rewards people that are doing things the right way.
We'll use that as a segue, because I wanted to ask you about the Football Guys Championship draft. I saw it on your timeline. Tell me a little bit about it and like what the deal is. It looked really cool.
Yeah, we've got, it's a $350 entry, $350,000 first prize. We listened, and what's really going to be neat about this is, again, as I said, the Football Guys brand is we're all one big group. We just happen to have microphones or computers in front of us. And we eliminated a kicker. We added a second flex. The league playoffs, so there's still prizes for winning just your 12-team league. It's not just about winning out of the pool of all the teams getting the big prize. Those actually happen in weeks 15, 16, and 17, just like your typical league, whereas a lot of the other high stakes, I think we're doing it including weeks 13 and 14, which have buys, right? So that's still going to be straight up. That's still going to be all of your players theoretically available. And what excites me is I think that we can be responsive in the future, and we don't have to be static, and we don't have to be wed to just one format. Can be the high stakes league of the people. And I think it's just something that the time has come, and we're really excited to have the opportunity to serve the community in a new way.
Now, I may be way off on here, but
Yeah.
these are teams that you guys drafted that other people buy into, or there is drafts for this.
There's drafts. Yeah, you buy your team. You buy your team at 350,
Right.
and you multiple. A lot of people do multiple teams, and yeah, you get your team. I forget the exact number of teams there is in the pool that has a $350,000 first prize. But yeah, it's a chance to take your shot at greatness for these days a pretty reasonable price point to get 1,000 times return.
Yeah, that's no doubt. All right, let's get into some players here. I've got a list of guys here. Golf or Cousins after you get out of that first wave of quarterbacks.
That's Goff. That's easy. That's a slam dunk Goff.
Am I crazy? Am I just higher on Golf than some people? But they're going to do a lot of throwing in that offense, right?
And they've got a version 2.0 that was one of the most efficient, productive offenses last year. It was the first year under Ben Johnson. They had a few weeks and then in 2021. And you're adding Jahmyr Gibbs, you're adding Sam Laporta, you're adding Jameson Williams for 11 games. So I think Ben Johnson's going to have a lot up his sleeve to use those weapons to put defenses in compromising positions.
It's amazing how little respect Goff gets around the league. Not just in fantasy, but just in general. I'm always surprised at he feels like a forgotten man. Antonio Gibson or Brian Robinson in the new Commanders offense?
That's got to be Gibson, right? Look, I think that we're in this weird era now, Doug, where nobody who covers teams are allowed to say very much, right?
Yep.
You can't say anything. And I think the players have absorbed that too. So when I hear Antonio Gibson say, I'm not just excited for myself, I'm excited for everybody, I'm open to Antonio Gibson being used in a different way. Right? Yes. Has he ever really been used in a way that matches his talents?
Not at all.
It might happen. It might not happen, but he's a 9th or 10th round pick. And it sure makes sense to me also, whether it's Jacoby Brissett or Sam Howell, to go with those high percentage layup type of throws. I think that's Antonio Gibson or Curtis Samuel. And I think we have to say, hey, the slate is clean with Eric Bieniemy. Let's listen really close to see how these players are going to be used or potential range of outcomes here. And I'm excited to have Antonio Gibson on my team this year.
I was glad that I didn't dump a bunch of the Gibson stock last year.
Yeah.
I've said this a bunch on the podcast. McKinnon for the Chiefs last year, second on the team in receiving touchdowns with 9. Right. Feels like even though Brian Robinson is going to be the starting back, there should be a lot of room for Antonio Gibson touchdowns. McLaurin or Dotson? Before Dotson gets hurt last year, he was on a tear.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be McLaurin right now. Well, see, you know what? Now, what makes it interesting is if you do pound for pound, like McLaurin in the 4th round versus Dotson in the 7th or 8th round. And that's where it gets a little bit more difficult to make the call. Because, I mean, McLaurin has been a massive hit as a pick. And his game, his deep game especially. I mean, have we, Doug, has there been a quarterback yet that's really unlocked what he can do in Washington?
No, nor an offensive coordinator.
No. So, we haven't even remotely seen the best of Terry McLaurin. It kind of reminds me of Lee Evans. Like there's a player you think well, are we ever going to get to see what this player can really do in the NFL? Whereas Jahan Dotson was a revelation because what he was doing last year didn't match what they told us the hot zones were in his game. Right? I mean, he was winning contested balls downfield. That wasn't supposed to be why he was a first-round pick. So he's a really exciting player. So yeah, I think especially with a new quarterback and a new offensive coordinator, I do think that you might see McLaurin with a little more specialized sort of take the top off the defense role. And we may see Jahan Dotson take that next step. So I think at their ADP in drafts, I'd probably take Dotson over McLaurin.
it feels like we've tried to draft Baltimore position players for
Right.
years, and outside of Lamar, nobody got you any points. Now, I think we talked about the enemy and what it might do for the Washington offense. I think Todd Monken will do some things in Baltimore that should allow people to get open in space, create catches for the running backs. Are there any in Baltimore that you're willing to say, I was standoffish about these guys in the
Right.
past, but it feels like they're draftable now?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even Lamar Jackson, right? I mean, Lamar Jackson's a round or so after the big three, Allen, Hurts, and Mahomes. I think that if he stays healthy, he should be producing right there with them. That's maybe a big if. But I think that we're going to get to see. There was a point, Doug, like a year or two ago, when Lamar Jackson said during a rough stretch, it feels like the defense knows the play. It feels like they know the play
Right.
that's coming.
Yeah.
That's Greg Roman in a nutshell, right? I mean, the NFL, if you're standing still in the NFL, you're falling behind, right?
Yeah.
So we haven't gotten to see Lamar Jackson in an offense that really embraces his talents as a pocket passer and uses the unique combination he has of breakaway speed and toughness and that pocket passing, especially in the middle of the field, to put defenses on their heels. It's been a ground and pound attack. So I think from a fantasy standpoint, what you're looking at here is a lot more passing production. Now, who do you target, right? I think
Rashad Bateman finally? Can we finally get
well,
some
yeah,
Bateman out?
so here's the thing. You might do, if you do a lot of leagues, you might just do a mix and match approach.
Right.
Because they're packed pretty close. I think you can make an argument for all three. I think that Bateman is probably the best the player that's on the ascent, but he had to have that injection in his foot. And the more a team says it's no big deal, the more I think is it a big deal. And then you have Odell Beckham, and boy, $15 million indicates to me that Baltimore expects a lot from him. But we've seen how his recent seasons end up, and almost by process of elimination, and also because he's the cheapest. What about Zay Flowers? And like
Yeah.
you said, Todd Monken might put more of, again, those layup throws. That's Zay Flowers in the slot, right? Or maybe the answer is Mark Andrews in a more robust passing game. But I think there will be at least one overachiever, and if Bateman or Beckham go down, you might have a big overachiever in Flowers.
My last year when we did these fantasy shows, my co-host was Nathan Coleman. He is doing a bit in Djibouti, Africa.
Oh wow,
So he is not
that's
here
way
with me
cooler than
this year.
fantasy football.
Yes, this is true, and he's serving his country, so we respect him for it. But what he always did was he put together for each segment a rookie versus the pros.
Uh-huh.
So I went to Football Guys. I pulled up the ADP. We'll shoot them out, and we'll see which ones you prefer. So
Right.
like Kamara at 89 versus a Kane at 103.
Oh, give me Devin A. Chain. And I think real quick, what I'll touch on here is if you watch the Dolphins last year, they had some absurd number of long passing plays. And if you watch those passing plays, the middle of the field was just wide open. I mean, there was so much space in the middle of the field. And they did stuff where they do those scatter plots, Doug, and their dot was like way off to the side, like away from like the line, the trend line. So that tells me that if you have a speedy player like Devin A. Chain, and you just give him opportunities as a receiver, which they have already been doing in OTAs, or even as a runner with the field spread out, you're going to see big plays. I think they knew exactly what they're doing. Yes, Dalvin Cook is still in up there, but I think they knew exactly what they were doing. I think we saw last year, whether it was Jeff Wilson or Raheem Mostert, who are both still on the team, that there's a lot of production there potentially in this running game. And I think A-Chain's the guy. Kamara, there's just so much uncertainty. They drafted Kendre Miller. They signed Jamal Williams. That tells me they expect him to maybe not play the whole year. I think there's a greater than 0% chance he's released. I don't think it's a very high chance. I'm just saying there's a lot of uncertainty there.
Cousins at 82 or Anthony Richardson at 100?
Give me Anthony Richardson. Kirk Cousins is just, exactly what you're going to get with Kirk Cousins. And I just don't think that's what you're looking for in fantasy drafts. I think it could be a really rough ride with Anthony Richardson, but we saw Justin Fields have a rough ride as a passer last year and still make a lot of noise for fantasy. And I'll just add this last thing. We have not seen an athlete at quarterback like Anthony Richardson, period,
Correct.
ever. We have not seen anything like it. I love having players like that on my fantasy team.
Pat Fryermuth at 88 or Michael Meyer at 148?
I'll probably go with Pat. just because I think that he and Kenny Pickett have a connection. I don't think that Darnell Washington is going to be more than a sixth tackle early on. I do think the Steelers' pass offense will take a step forward. Michael Mayer's interesting. Austin Hooper's still there. But I just think with the Jimmy Garoppolo questions, if Brian Hoyer or Aiden O'Connell is the quarterback for that team, do you really want anybody from that team?
No, you do not. Let's see. Got two more: Stroud at 140 or Sam Howell at 177.
Give me Sam Howell. Let me have a chance with Sam Howell. I mean, he had some good rushing stats in college. I think that we saw Taylor Heineke flirt with fantasy relevance. I think that he's got an opportunity there with that offense having the drop on everybody. CJ Stroud, I'm rooting for him. I just think that acclamation for rookies, for Sam Howell to have that redshirt year, if you will, gives him a little better chance of being a success right away.
The final one is James Cook at 93 or Kendre Miller at 116.
Probably James Cook. And the main reason I say James Cook is just because it's Buffalo's offense. Good things grow there. And they generally don't trust rookies. So the fact that he wasn't that involved last year doesn't mean that he's a bust. I think this year you're going to see more involvement. You're going to see him doing things against defenses that are going to be concerned about other players than him.
We always wrap up like this, Sigmund. For folk trying to get into the space, for young kids trying to do it now, what is the best piece of advice you'd give to them?
Do work that you enjoy so that it's its own reward, and the rest kind of falls into place. And on top of that, I would say enthusiasm, passion, positivity. These are attractive qualities. These are the things that, and it should be genuine. You can't really fake that stuff. But these are the things that will draw people to you and create your community. And be yourself, because everybody else is already taken. You're going to create the community around yourself that you should create if you're yourself. And it's kind of like going on a blind date and pretending you're somebody you're not. Well, even if it works, then you have to pretend to be that person to keep that relationship going. So start out just being yourself, and then it'll be really easy to maintain your relationships.
I love it. Sigmund, thank you for today, man. This was a blast. We appreciate you.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity.